Okay, so we're just going to finish the story here with Andrew Jackson. We've talked about some of the other major events in his presidency, and now we want to go to sort of like the pièce de résistance of his presidency, which is his war with the bank, right? And the bank we're talking about here is Henry Clay's creation, the second Bank of the United States, which is up for recharter in 1836. Wait a minute, why does it say 1832 on the board? Any ideas? Well, because Henry Clay really hated Andrew Jackson. Maybe that helps to explain how I feel about Andrew Jackson. And Henry Clay was trying to find a way to doom Andrew Jackson's second term. Like, he wanted to try to prevent Jackson from being reelected. So Jackson is running for re-election in 1832, and Clay thinks he's found the way to ruin Andrew Jackson. He clearly has underestimated the level of craziness in America in favor of Andrew Jackson. But anyway, here's what he does. He says, I'm going to propose the re-charter of the Bank of the United States 4 years early. So when the bank is created, it has a charter, right, that lasts for a certain number of years. And when the charter expires, if the bank isn't renewed, then what will happen to the bank? It will close down, right? Because like the first Bank of the United States closed down when its charter expired. So the charter for the bank is set to expire in 1836, but Clay wants to make it an election issue in 1832. He wants it to affect Jackson. So he brings up the bill to recharter the bank in 1832. And the way he sees it, Jackson has two choices. He can accept the bank bill. He can sign it. Congress is going to pass this recharter, and he can sign it. And if he does that, he's going to make a lot of his most fervent supporters really angry, right? Like the people on these poor farmers of the Western frontier who hate the bank because they think that it artificially drives up interest rates and has made it hard for them to pay back their loans or whatever it is. So he could accept the bank and make all those people mad, or he could veto the bank bill. And then he would alienate the Northeast, right? All of these states that rely upon sound credit and stable currency and all this business. And Clay thinks that if he alienates the Northeast, that will doom his re-election prospects, right? So one way or the other, he's going to lose the election if he alienates one of these two groups. Unfortunately for Henry Clay, he has underestimated the failure to abide by the facts of many of Jackson's supporters, and so Jackson's supporters choose to vote him into office, even though Jackson vetoes the bank bill. So he vetoes the bank bill, but he still manages to win because there are enough people in New England who support Jackson, even though the closing of the bank is going to make their lives really difficult. So they're not really representing or understanding the reality of what's going on. So Jackson vetoes the bank bill, he wins re-election anyway, and to him, that is a big thumbs up, right? He vetoes the bank, and then the country re-elects him anyway, and he's going, hello, clearly the entire country must want me to kill the bank. He also has this special personal feud with the president of the Second Bank of the United States. His name is Nicholas Biddle, and to be honest, Biddle doesn't do a lot to save his reputation. He's one of the kinds of people who dresses up in super fancy clothes just to go to the grocery store and insists on drinking his tea from a gilded cup with his pinky up in the air. He really lives the reputation of being an elitist, out of touch kind of person, but he's really good at managing the bank. Anyway, Jackson hates him, and Biddle thinks Jackson is the scum of the earth, ignorant, violent, whatever. So Jackson's famous line is he goes, the bank and Biddle are trying to kill me, but I will kill it, right? And in fact, he does. So here's what he says. Remember, the bank still has 4 years left to live, at least, right? Its charter is not expired yet. And so the bank is going to continue to exist for 4 more years. And in that time, Clay might have found a way to get it passed or to get the charter renewed. So Jackson decides not to wait that long. So what he's going to do is this. He's going to begin withdrawing federal funds from the bank. Jackson is going to begin withdrawing federal funds from the bank. Now remember, the Bank of the United States is chartered by the U.S. government, but it is run primarily by private investors, right? These are private individuals who are not employed by the government. They've invested their money, and the bank itself does more than just hold on to the U.S. national government's money. They also take in other investments. They make loans of their own in order to make money to continue to be profitable. It's a functional bank. Understand how that works? So Jackson begins to withdraw the national government's money from the bank. Well, what is the bank going to do in response to that? Well, Nicholas Biddle is a smart guy, and he's doing the best he can to keep the bank running, to keep it profitable for its investors, to like continue to manage, because the bank can't function if it doesn't have enough like capital in order to control the interest rates. So Biddle begins to call in loans. What that means is he's going to call up people who have borrowed money from the national bank and say, hey, I know you weren't supposed to repay us until next month or whatever, or next year, but you've got to repay us now. We're going to call in those loans. You have to give it back now. Now, can you imagine if, like, what if your parents' bank, like if you're in your mortgage, called your parents tomorrow and were like, sorry, I know we lent you that $150,000 or whatever it was, but we need it tomorrow. So if you could just give that to us, that'd be great. It would be chaos, right? It would be all kinds of, like, people don't have that money. It's going to cause them to go into debt elsewhere. They're going to be overextending themselves. Some of the loans won't get paid back. That in and of itself causes financial panic, mostly in New England, right? This place where credit is a really significant factor to keep the economy going and growing. New England is going to sort of go up in flames because of the sort of destruction of the national bank. But that's not the end of it. Because what does Jackson do with the federal money that he takes out of the national bank? He puts it in those so-called pet banks. He gives it to states. Various states have their own banks. And he puts it in these states banks. Well, first of all, they're called pet banks because Jackson, of course, picks states that are friendly to his policies to deposit these federal dollars. And then second of all, these state banks, if there's no national bank like setting, through its example and through its influence, like national credit or like controlling the availability of money, the state banks now have all this extra cash, right? This national government's money. And what do they do with it? They begin loaning it out all over the place, right? Banks make money by loaning money out. So that the state banks, these pet banks, begin loaning the money all over the place. Well, what does that do? Well, first of all, it's federal money, so the federal government is going to be in trouble if it needs any of that money. But more than that, if you loan too much money out, if it's not regulated, what happens to the value of the dollar? It begins to go down. So now all of a sudden we see inflation, right? The value of the dollar is going down. We see inflation all over the place. Land prices, this is mostly in the South and West, right? Those are the pet banks. Those are the friendly states where Jackson puts the money. So land prices are going to skyrocket because the value of the dollar is going down. People, speculators are going to be snapping up money. They're getting these easy loans, buying a whole bunch of land and trying to sell it off for even a higher price to get profit. Like, this is all going really bad. Jackson sees that it's getting pretty rough out there. So he decides he's going to respond with something called the specie circular. The specie circular, what's specie? Something. Specie is hard currency. It's like a gold coin or a silver coin. It's not paper money. So specie is money that has value in and of itself, right? It's precious metals, essentially. And so Jackson says, oh my gosh, the price, we've got wild speculation and like land prices are skyrocketing and this is really bad and people are getting defrauded. So Jackson tries to sort of salvage the situation by issuing this specie circular. This is a law that's going to say that all federal lands have to be purchased with specie, with hard currency. That you can't use banknotes or paper money, basically, to buy federal land. But do people have very much specie? So now what happens? The prices go down, right? They plummet. I mean, if I were to have a cupcake business and I demanded that the only way you could have one of my cupcakes was to pay me in gold, well, you don't have very much gold, do you? There's not very much gold floating around. So if I were to be able to sell it at all, I'd have to really lower the price. You can give me one tiny gold speck and I'll give you whatever. The price would have to come down because you don't have access to that kind of currency. So now the prices, which had just skyrocketed, then plummet. Now that's going to destroy the sort of economy of the South and West, where these people who have tried to stake their fortunes on higher land prices are now going to be completely in disarray. It's just really, really, really bad. So in 1836, a depression begins, which, if it hadn't been for the depression in 1873 and then 1893 and then in 1932, this one would have been the Great Depression. So maybe I should rephrase. It's at least one of the top 5 greatest depressions of our history, right? It's a really, really tough economic spot. And this is the first real economic collapse of this new market revolution era, right? Like this new economy people are trying to experience, this is the first real failure of that economy. And it is all Andrew Jackson's fault. But you want to know the great irony of history? Information travels so slowly, and this process took such a long time to develop over the course of about a year and a half, that by the time the full extent of this depression becomes known, Jackson's already out of office. He's served his 2 terms. He's off to retirement to wander around the country, continuing to smear Henry Clay's good name. So Jackson, at the time, doesn't even get blamed for this crisis that he created through his war with the bank. By the way, the bank, he's successful. The bank dies, right? The National Bank can't survive all of this. The stability of credit has been severely undermined, and so the bank will sort of limp along to 1836, and then it will, be done with. So in any case, Jackson's successor, Martin Van Buren, is going to get most of the blame for this big catastrophe, but he'll find a way to pin it on the elites of the country. And it's sort of this great exercise in what happens when people who don't understand the economy try to control the economy, which sort of goes for both sides of the political aisle these days. So all of this, so this is a very famous political cartoon that has to do with Jackson's veto of the bank. At the time, people in the legislature, Henry Clay foremost among them, saw this use of the veto over a question of personal preference as being wildly unconstitutional. They thought that Jackson was abusing his power. Now these days, we expect presidents to veto laws they don't like, right? If a law gets passed the president doesn't like, the president will veto it. Recently, multiple times, Congress has tried to get rid of Obamacare, right? And President Obama has vetoed those laws. He doesn't like them. He's not going to let them pass. But in the 1830s, there was this idea that the veto was solely for the president to use if Congress passes a law that is unconstitutional. Well, the National Bank has been clearly shown to be constitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. So the Congress sort of has this feeling that the president has no right to veto the law. I mean, who elected Congress? The people did, directly, right? The U.S. House of Representatives was directly elected by the people. The Senate was chosen by the states. Who is this one guy, this president, chosen by some electors, to say what direction the country should go in? The Congress was chosen for that purpose. How dare the president get in their way? So this cartoon then reflects this idea that Andrew Jackson was acting more like a monarch than he was a president. He wasn't serving the people. The people chose those congressional representatives to do what they were supposed to do. And Andrew Jackson is getting in their way, is just doing what he wants to. He's exercising his power like a king would. Now, I'll leave that up to you. If you think that Jackson was being a king here and abusing his power, certainly the way we currently understand executive power, this is not out of the norm. But at that time, it really was. On the other hand, Jackson would say that he was being representative of the people. The people didn't like the bank. The people re-elected him when he vetoed the bank the first time, and so therefore, by continuing his crusade against the bank, he was simply carrying out their wishes. You have to decide if you think that Jackson was being particularly democratic here or not. In any case, there's a large group of people who don't like it. Let's see if we can name the people who don't like Andrew Jackson. Henry Clay. I'll start. Who else? What kinds of people are now mad at Andrew Jackson? Okay, so Northerners in general, you say in elites, so I'm going to go with Northerners involved in commerce or manufacturing. Who would have been the leaders there? Who else? Yeah, John T. Calhoun Nathan, for sure. And with him, all of South Carolina. And more broadly speaking, most of the South, especially Southern planters.
Pretty large chunk of Congress.
Congress. Who else? Nicholas Biddle. The financiers of the world and of the country. Then, of course, there are large Western farmers who have seen the properties, the value of their property, wildly fluctuate, and many of them who have been ruined by this bank crisis. Then, of course, there's these anti-Masons. Jackson was a Mason, and he was always very I'm more powerful and special than you. He had a bit of like an inferiority complex, I think. Anyway, so there's like a group of people called the anti-Masons. Jackson is definitely pro-slavery. He's super racist. Oh, we forgot like every Native American. They can't vote. I guess we don't need to include them. I mean, you know, women also probably hated Andrew Jackson, but they also don't count. We'll do like abolitionists. They're mad at him. So all of these people, in the wake of the Bank War, which is really kind of like the final straw for a lot of people, are going to get together and they're going to form their own political party called the Whigs. It's a reference to one of the British political parties that existed during the time of the American Revolution. They were the Tories and the Whigs, but anyway, that's not really important. Just sometimes students go like, they call themselves the Whigs. It has nothing to do with like a wig on your head. Just a party name. So they're going to form this party called the Whigs, and so here, in sort of the fallout of the Bank War, we see the rise or the reemergence of the two-party system in America. So officially speaking, the era of good feelings lasts from the end of the War of 1812, right, when the Federalist Party dissolves, to the Bank War in 1836, or 34, 35. So here we see the rise of the Whig Party. And when the Whigs arise, then the Jacksonians sort of officially begin to call themselves just the Democrats. They no longer identify, because of course, all of these people used to be members, along with Jackson and all of his people, of that Democratic Republican Party, right? So like all of those people were members of the Democratic Republican Party. So after the emergence of the Whigs, then the Jacksonians become just the Democrats. And then all of the non-Jacksonians, people who hate Jackson, will become the Whigs. Now, one last thing I want to point out here is that all of these people have some things in common. We'll talk about that later. But can you think of one major issue that would not be particularly amicable between, say, Northerners and South Carolina? Slavery, right? So the Whigs are going to exist as a party from here in the 1830s until about 1856. And then in 1856, the Whigs are going to really fall apart because they never do take any significant stand on slavery, because how could they, right? The Whigs are this mix of people with very different interests as it relates to slavery. And so they can't ever take a stand on slavery, and of course slavery becomes the issue in the 1850s. So the Whigs, obviously we don't have the Whigs anymore, but anyway, the Whigs will last for a little while. Speaking of which, let's look at their policies. The Democrats are going to then emerge to become essentially the party of laissez-faire economics. They want the government to get out of the way. Just get the government off our backs, no taxes, no tariffs, no economic direction, just leave us alone, let us do what we want to. Therefore, this is the party that's going to be well respected or going to be sort of supported, broadly speaking, by the poor, right? People with no significant stake in the market economy, backwoods farmers, small farmers in the South, not planters, immigrant workers in the northern cities who feel, like a classist clash with the industrial elites who are growing in power in the Northeast. So that Democratic Party is going to become the party at this point of sort of the lower, broadly speaking, the lower classes of people who just want the government to leave them alone. Meanwhile, the Whigs are going to argue that in fact we need the government to promote economic growth, to promote economic stability. The economy is changing and the government needs to evolve along with it. We need people who know what the heck they're doing to be in charge of politics so we don't see screw-ups like happened in the Jackson administration. They're going to argue then for active government. And they're going to represent, as you can see on the board, sort of a broad mix of people that include industrialists, planters, and just generally the elites of society everywhere. So you could argue that this is sort of a animation of the political system between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, right? In this case, the Whigs are taking on most of the ideas of the Federalists, and the Democrats are taking on most of the ideas of those Jeffersonians, small government, and so on. So that's where politics stands at the end of the Jacksonian era. We're going to switch gears now and start talking about the Second Great Awakening. So we'll stop here for a minute.